Okay, so thank you very much for inviting us for giving a presentation. We are we're very happy and want to say thank you again for receiving the grant, which allowed us to do a very specific analysis with data we had already collected, and we're able now to give the presentation which we share, Elena and me, making the future a better place, emerging adults as actors of social change. And to get into the topic, I hope this works now. We start with some music. Can you hear this?
Yes.
So you can hear and see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why have I lost it? Okay, this was to get you into the topic, which is the political engagement of young adults. And also here you see a picture of a young activist in the Fridays for Future movement, and she has written on her hands, "Our future in your hands." So, and I put here a question mark because we also found in research that young people not only blame the older generation or think they have the responsibility for the future, but they also feel responsible themselves. And the young activists also experience political self-efficacy. This also means that we have a theoretical understanding of young people as actors of social change and not just seeing them as victims of politics. And in this meaning, our research also aims to contributing to the theoretical approach of young people's agency. And after this small introduction, Elena will talk about the project and give an overview over the methodology, and then I take over again. Elena, please.
Okay, so the aim of the Global Gen Z study was to collect globally comparable data on the characteristics, perspectives, and preferences of Generation Z. So Generation Z, as you all know, maybe, is basically includes people born between 1995 and 2010, which means the people surveyed are currently between 30 and 15 years old. For this purpose, a questionnaire was constructed consisting of 35 closed and 6 open questions. This questionnaire was translated into 19 languages, and among other things, the researchers asked questions about the young people's relationships, as well as their social and political commitment. In addition, data was collected on the use of social media, behavior during the COVID-19 pandemic, concerns and motivations. The survey took place between September 2021 and January 2022, and 32 countries from all continents took part in the survey. Maybe, for example, the USA, United Kingdom, Brazil, Germany, and Austria were among the countries involved. And a total of 91 researchers were involved in the research process. So, but let's take a closer look at the Global Gen Z study sample. Natalia, can you?
Oh, sorry.
So, a total of 21,377 people worldwide took part in the survey. The majority of participants were students, which is also reflected in the fact that only 25% of participants were aged 18 or under at the time of the survey. The distribution is similar for the Austrian sample. Here, a total of 1,241 students took part in the survey. However, 87% of participants were older than 18 at the time of the survey. We can also recognize is that significantly more females took part in the survey.
Okay.
So let's move on to our method of analysis, the structured tabular approach. The analysis phase began with my participation in an information workshop led by Oliver Robinson, who's here also. So the focus of qualitative research and evaluation is primarily on the goal of gaining a deeper understanding by analysis of long texts. But even short texts contain a lot of information that is worth analyzing. The structured tabular approach is a way of analyzing short texts that have been collected, for example, in the course of surveys using open questions. And short text can be important for social research, and it can be assumed that the importance of short text will increase, for example, because social network platforms such as X, formerly Twitter, offer a large number of texts of this type. And the STTA is situated between the thematic analysis approach according to Boyatzis and Braun and Clark, and the analysis of short text according to Bamberg and Georgakopoulou. So, but how does STTA work? In principle, the STTA can carried out deductively or inductively or even hybrid. To analyze the answers to the open question, how can your generation make the world a better place? We opted for a hybrid approach. We sat down together and developed an initial category system based on theoretical considerations. We then took a close look to the 568 answers to the questions. And based on the first 100 answers, we further developed and differentiated our category system. So subsequently, 2 team members independently assigned categories to the individual statements. We proceed in such a way that one person started with the first answer and one person started with the last answer. We then practically met in the middle, and we then both went through the other person's categorization and discussed those statements or categorizations again, where we would have assigned different categories. In this way, we ensured that there was sufficient inter-analysis agreement. We then analyzed the frequencies of the different categories, and then we also analyzed whether some categories were mentioned particularly frequently together with other categories. So the next slide, please. As already mentioned, we took a close look at the open question, how can your generation make the world a better place, which was answered by 568 people in Austria. In order to focus the results for today's presentation, we addressed 3 central research questions. On the one hand, we wanted to find out which themes are important to Generation Z, so in which areas changes should take place. In addition, we looked at how change should happen. In other words, what actions Generation Z suggests making the world a better place. And finally, we also looked at whether there are connections between the proposed actions and the topics mentioned. Whether they believe that a particular topic requires a particular type of engagement. So, but Natalia will now give you an insight into the key findings of our analysis.
Yes, thank you. We have, you see here, the six main categories we have developed, and the one that is highlighted in yellow is which actions the young people think the young generation should take. And the ranking here from the six kind of actions, it reflects the frequency. How often those type of actions, those categories, subcategories were mentioned. And as you can see, the one on the very top is generating and exchanging knowledge. This means, for example, that they said, well, we have to get, we need more education, people need to, through education, to become more aware of problems and so on. A lot of second most mentioned actions were individual actions, which means that they said we all have to reduce consumerism, or and so on. And political actions is, for example, voting, going to protest. Unspecified action means they just said we have to do something this way. Some answers also refer to a fundamental change, that we need a revolution, and others very often said we have to focus on this and that problem, but didn't say what focus actually means with which type of action. The second category, the second main category, is how one's personal mindset, how attitudes should change, how which change of values would be needed. And above all, they refer to cosmopolitan values. By that we mean, for example, open-mindedness or being more tolerant and so on. Personal values, for example, means being more friendly and being more modest. Then other values were very often solidarity was also mentioned, and then we had political values of equity as a whole, another category, and then development-oriented values. By that we mean that they say we shouldn't be conservative and don't stick to the status quo, but move on, and so that we can change things for the better. The next category, which is called your perceived need for action, this is the themes, the topics that they have mentioned where change is needed. Number one, as you can imagine, is climate change. This is also in accordance with other youth studies or studies on young people and emerging adults. And number two topic was capitalism, and then there were the other topics were about equal rights, racism, sexism, homophobia. This was what I later referred to equal rights topics. And then peace was also mentioned explicitly several times, and also poverty. We had some smaller main categories. One was that evolved from the material, from the data we have analyzed, from the answers to the open questions. How can your generation make the world a better place? And that was also who should take action, who should be responsibility for doing this, and other than if it wasn't mentioned explicitly, we considered, okay, since the question was how can your generation make the world a better place, it's that we considered they mean your generation, the Generation Z. But sometimes they mentioned something else than generation. Then they mentioned something like individuals. That it's we all have to do. We all should drive less cars, for example. We should go by train, but not by plane, and so on. Politics, politicians or politics, then oneself. Can do this and that, should do this and that, and or they address also the older generation or the economy. Another category that emerged was self-efficacy of oneself or of the generation, and so there's 3 subcategories, and one would be that they feel powerless or unaware of problems. The other one's the opposite. They're full of energy and motivated for taking action, political engagement. And then there is the pessimistic category. So we want to do something, but actually we don't think it's change anything. And then the smallest category is the assignment of blame and responsibility. This is where they say someone else is, the older generation, economy, politics, is responsible for problems we have. And in the next step, we have had a closer look on these 2 main categories and also on how they are related. I've set the themes. There is not too much to add for general understanding. I've also explained the subcategories for the actions, and so I'll jump to the next slide, showing the relationship between the action, which you see here. We have PIC generating and exchanging knowledge, individual actions or political actions, and how they're related to climate change, capitalism, and other themes, above all, equal rights, women's rights, and so on. And the idea was, you could say the hypothesis was that climate change might be more related to individual action. For example, that I don't want to, for saving the future, I don't want to drive, people shouldn't drive cars. And whereas capitalism, we thought, would be more related to political actions. We found that this is true, but it's a weak relationship. In general, we can say, taking all themes together, in total, there is more focus on political actions. You probably realized I'm not talking much about generating and exchanging knowledge, because we think this is very much related to the bias of having a college student, university student sample, where they put a lot of emphasis on education, on sharing and generating and sharing knowledge on things, on creating awareness, and they think this is an important way to solve problems.
Natalia, you've got about 4 minutes left.
Okay, this is I'll be fine. Here are some examples looking deeper into individual and political action. And I give you just quickly some examples for individual action. This is the yellow ones. The blue ones are political action. And a lot of answers of the emerging adults in the sample, they have a combination of both. So a classic individual action, typical individual action answer would be take an active interest in the environment, and that means avoiding cars, avoiding flights, and so on. Or stop buying fast fashion, turn away from hurtful social norms. And political action includes voting, but also going to protest, paying it, negotiating, being loud, like also forms of non-conventional politics. And typically, or very often, they have both. They address both individual and political action. For example, education is important for raising awareness. Nothing works without knowledge about the problems, but this knowledge is not enough. You must also be aware of the issues and address them. And addressing them relates then to actions, which is going to protest, but also lifestyle changes. So here we have all kinds of type of actions. To conclude, to summarize and to conclude which themes they want to get engaged in. This is climate change, capitalism, social equality or social justice topics. In which ways do they want to get engaged? Above all, they see the need to share more knowledge for creating more awareness. But we have to keep in mind that this is a university students sample above all. There, we also found a strong focus on individual responsibility and regarding political action, conventional as well as unconventional forms of political engagement. Then we had a look on how the selected themes and types of actions are related. We found they're only weakly related, but as expected, climate change is more related to individual action, and capitalism, topics on capitalism, criticizing capitalism, are more related to political action. So coming back to the initial question of taking, is it that they're taking their future in our hands, in the adults' hands, or rather in their own hands? So yes, they showed a lot of interest in different and willingness to engage for different problems in a political way. But regarding climate change, they report more individual than political action. Thank you very much. I stop sharing now.